School of Kung Fu Culture, and we have our very special guest, Claire. All right, so we're talking today about General Yue Fei from Chinese history. He's basically one like the more you get into like kung fu and kung fu history, then you're definitely going to be hearing this name. Okay, so actually, Claire, can you give us a kind of like, can you kind of tell us a little bit about like we have something that we're going to present a little bit later that goes more in depth, but Claire, can you kind of give us like a little taste of who this person was?
Okay. The important thing is Yue Fei was a real people. He lived. And I think even in nowadays, if you ask a random Chinese you ran into on the street, every one of them knows Yue Fei because he was famous for his loyalty to his country. He was a very good leader in his army because his soldiers never harassed the civilians, not like the police nowadays. They may bully people sometimes, but the soldiers in Yue Fei's army always protected the civilians. They tried to reclaim the lost territory. That's why people respect Yue Fei for his loyalty, and people feel sorry for him because he was accused of treason without solid evidence. That's why people always uphold him, because for general Chinese, we want justice and we despise corruption. Maybe every I think every Chinese knows Yue Fei. Maybe they don't know the details of his victory in the battlefields or the details of how he got accused, but they do know his high moral standard and his loyalty.
Yeah, yeah. So with that being said, we had a couple things. So we're going to well actually Claire put together a lot of research on UFA and she entered it into Google's Notebook LM. And for those of you who don't know that app, it's a really great research tool, right? So you can insert all types of sources, whether it be like PDFs or videos and articles and all that. So you can put it all into one place. And then one of the things it can generate for you is a podcast. So we decided to maybe we'll just play it for you. We also put the text, like the subtitle. I added subtitles so you can actually follow along if you're watching the video, and it'll give you a lot of the main details about UFA, his life, and his legacy. And then we'll be right back after that to answer any questions. So if anyone has a question or comment during that time, feel free to write it in the chat box. If you're watching live on Twitch or on YouTube, feel free to comment. And once it's over, then we'll reply. So without further ado, let's go ahead and add it. So you won't see people's voice. You won't see people talking because it's just AI, but you'll hear a man and a woman talk. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we're focusing on one of the most critical and frankly mythologized figures in all of Chinese history, General Yue Fei. He was the famous defender of the Southern Song dynasty during those devastating wars against the Jin Empire back in the 12th century. And he's, universally seen as the ultimate symbol of Jingzong, or perfect loyalty.
And the tension in his story is just immense, isn't it? He's this crucial culture hero, but the historical facts and the cultural stories that have grown up around him, they feel like they're constantly at war with each other. His life was defined by this incredible strategic genius, but his legacy, well, it was defined by a brutal political betrayal.
Which brings us right to the heart of our question today. Where does the true significance of Yue Fei actually lie? Is it in the objective reality of his military genius, his radical organizational reforms and the strategic innovations he used to basically save the Southern Song state from being completely wiped out? That's my position, that the verifiable fact of his effectiveness is what's paramount.
And I would argue that the enduring power, the eternal resonance of Yue Fei is entirely cultural. It's rooted in his deliberate transformation into an iconic martyr, a symbol of the national spirit, and this is key, the legendary, though historically contested, founder of major Chinese martial arts. We have to acknowledge that the outcome of his military career was, in the end, failure. That makes the myth of his betrayal his ultimate achievement.
Well, to really understand why his reforms were so necessary, you have to look at the historical decay of the early 12th century. The Northern Song dynasty had embraced this policy, Zhongwen Qingwu. Essentially, it means emphasizing the civil administration while deliberately weakening the military. This institutional policy created an army that was, by the time the Jin invaded and sacked the capital, it was just disorganized, poorly trained, and completely corrupt.
Right, and that led to the total political collapse of the North. The emperor himself was captured. It was a crisis of state security rooted entirely in that long-term marginalization of the military.
Precisely. And in that vacuum, Yue Fei's rise was absolutely critical. His primary verifiable achievement was the creation of the highly disciplined Yu Army, the Yu Jejun. This was a necessary military reform, not just some successful unit. They had selective recruitment, incredibly rigorous training. We're talking navigating obstacle courses in full armor. And, maybe most importantly, this ironclad ethical code. The death penalty was in effect for even minor things, like trampling a farmer's crops.
Okay. I don't deny those facts about the organization, but how did that extreme discipline practically translate into an advantage on the battlefield, beyond just, keeping order?
It created unparalleled civilian loyalty, which is the key. In that period of instability, most Song forces were seen as little better than bandits. The Yu Jiajun, on the other hand, was seen as a protector. This loyalty gave them huge logistical superiority. Food, shelter, transport were all willingly provided by the local people. And, critically, superior intelligence. Locals gave Yue Fei information the centralized Song court often didn't have. This is empirical evidence of organization translating directly into military success.
That's a powerful argument for his organizational genius. I'll grant you that. But I think focusing only on the military necessity obscures the political danger of that very virtue. Yue Fei's commitment to serve the country with the utmost loyalty, the famous tattoo on his back, it made him formidable, sure, but it also made him a political liability to the new Southern Song court.
But his tactical brilliance was aimed squarely at the enemy. He confronted the biggest challenge of the era, the Jurchen Jin's elite heavy cavalry. He just rejected the rigid, predictable Song formations and instead developed specific necessary counters to units like the Taifu Tu. These were heavily armored cataphracts, often chained together, and their flanking light cavalry, the Guaizima.
So what was the specific innovation he came up with to overcome that kind of armored dominance?
He equipped specialized infantry with the Zhahan Madao, the horse-cutting sabers, a heavy two-handed weapon. These units were trained to charge in low, completely ignore the nearly invulnerable armored riders, and just aim for the unprotected legs of the horses. You knock down one horse in a changed trio, the whole formation collapses. This simple, innovative blueprint broke the Jin's core tactical advantage. It was absolutely essential for the Southern Song survival. That is objective military history that shaped the entire war.
See, I fundamentally disagree that military history dictates his legacy. Achievements on the battlefield are temporary. Yue Fei's genius, even when it was successful, like the recovery of Shenyang, was ultimately just nullified by the political reality of the Southern Song court.
So that makes his recall and execution a political failing then, not a military one.
It makes his true legacy a cultural one. His military success provided the potential, sure, but his execution at age 39 on the completely groundless charge of Mo Su Yuo, a phrase meaning perhaps there is or, evidence is unnecessary, that's what sealed his mythic status. That single act instantly transformed him from a successful general into the ultimate loyal patriot betrayed by a cynical state led by Emperor Gaozong and Chancellor Qin Hui.
Okay, let's zero in on that. Was his famous discipline truly his greatest asset,
Or was it the reason he ultimately failed? I maintain that the relationship the Yu army built with the people allowed them to win crucial battles, like the major success at Zhuxianzhen in 1140, where they really pushed the Jin back. The discipline was the infrastructure for victory.
But that success is undeniable. But the need for that kind of radical organization just highlights how badly the Zhongwen Qingwu policy had failed the state. And here's the political trap. When a general achieves that level of discipline and popular loyalty, his power base shifts away from the emperor's direct control.
But his loyalty was absolute. I mean, he literally carried it on his back.
His loyalty was to the ideal of total recovery, which meant driving the Jin completely out and reclaiming the north. Emperor Gaozong, though, feared a powerful general more than he feared the Jin. He had this deep dynastic paranoia, right? He'd seen the chaos and coups of the northern Song. So Yue Fei's discipline and his constant push to continue the war, it directly threatened the political peace that Qinhui and Gaozong wanted. His discipline, ironically, made him a credible threat. It made his execution politically necessary for the peace faction to secure that humiliating Treaty of Shaoxing.
I see the dynamic you're describing, where the court saw his success as an internal danger. But that frames the whole thing as a civil issue. He was on the cusp of rolling back the Jin threat entirely when he was recalled. He was a strategic master undermined by a hostile court that had already decided on ceding land and paying tribute. His military genius saved the dynasty. The politicians sold it out.
But the lasting image for generations isn't the complexity of the treaty, is it? It's the morally clear story of the loyal hero poisoned by the treacherous chancellor. If we accept that the political necessity of his death overshadowed his military virtue, maybe we should look at where his legacy really took root, specifically in creating cultural systems like martial arts.
Let's shift there then, to the physical manifestation of this debate, his contested legacy in wushu. He's traditionally named as the founder of some major Chinese fighting systems.
Exactly. And I come at this from a position of, well, skepticism about that lineage. If his importance were purely historical, the connections to systems like Xingyi Xuan and Eagle Claw, they'd be verifiable. But modern historians consistently view these attributions like Xingyi Xuan being for his generals based on spear fighting, or Eagle Claw for his soldiers focusing on grappling, as definitively legendary, not historical.
So why did these arts need to use his name?
Because the myth-making process actively required a heroic origin to give these styles legitimacy. In Chinese martial arts history, if you link a style to a figure of great military and moral prestige, like Yue Fei, it grants it status. For example, the traditional story is that the Xingyi manual was only rediscovered centuries later. The culture needs a hero to be the father of these powerful martial arts, and no one fit the moral and military bill better than the martyr Yue Fei.
I'd challenge that by suggesting the connection is rooted in his strategic doctrine. Even if the direct historical lineage is tenuous, we know he trained his forces with incredible rigor to counter specific threats. Well, Xing Yi's methodology, focusing on linear, aggressive, explosive power derived from spear techniques, it aligns perfectly with the need for immediate, decisive battlefield effectiveness against heavy armor. It's a distilled battlefield system, and its coherence suggests a strategic, not a mystical origin.
But you're relying on circumstantial evidence there. The evidence for it being a legend is far stronger than the evidence for a direct historical link.
Well, even in fiction, his tactical wisdom is what endures. Think about his cultural presence in modern wuxia. In Jin Yang's famous novels, The Legend of the Condor Heroes, the whole plot revolves around enemies seeking the fictional military treatise The Wu Mu Yishu, supposedly written by Yue Fei in prison. It contains his ultimate strategic wisdom. The fact that his spirit is constantly being used by the culture to provide blueprints to fight new enemies, it proves his tactical brilliance is what's valued and passed down, even when it's fictionalized. The myth is compelling because the foundation of military utility is so strong.
But the utility of his strategy requires the tragedy of his betrayal to give it that moral weight. Let's go back to that ultimate political trap. You maintain he was a strategic genius whose military career was just cut short by cynical politics.
Absolutely. His tactical adaptation using specialized infantry to beat the Jin's best armored units, it was brilliant. The military momentum had shifted entirely in his favor. His career was a series of tactical successes that were cut short at the most decisive moment.
I'm sorry, but I find that reliance on what might have been to be a bit flawed. If your historical significance rests on narrative potential, the recovery of the North, it's not a verifiable fact. What is undeniable is the cultural fact that his death created an eternal, morally clear narrative of national honor versus treachery. The complex political reality gets simplified into a powerful moral lesson for every generation.
But that simplification obscures the factual context that made him great in the first place. The organization, the tactics.
Yet, it's the simplification that gives him his eternal power. When Emperor Shaozong officially rehabilitated him in 1162, giving him the posthumous name Wumu, martial and majestic, and the title King of Yi, that official restoration after his death confirmed that his true power lies in his moral and symbolic status as a culture hero. He gained that lasting status through martyrdom, not just on the battlefield. I mean, look at the public ritual of shaming Qin Hui's statues. It's a collective political act that reinforces his position as a moral exemplar, a position he earned in death.
I maintain that Yue Fei's legacy is a fusion, yes, but the foundation has to rest on the fact that he was a genuine military innovator who successfully reorganized a broken military system. He designed specific, effective counters to the most formidable force of his time. His commitment to national duty was translated into tangible military successes that fundamentally preserved the Southern Song, creating the stability for everything that came later.
That's a compelling argument. But isn't it possible that the enduring image of General Yue Fei is defined by the tragedy of his betrayal, precisely because historical success can always be reversed by politics? He functions as an eternal vehicle for moral clarity, proving that complexity often requires multiple perspectives to really appreciate the interplay between verifiable history and powerful cultural myth-making. His status is the ultimate symbol of loyalty that transcends any specific detail about the Taifutu or the Zanmadao.
Indeed. And perhaps the true genius of his legacy is that the myth compels future generations to study the actual man behind it, ensuring his tactical and organizational reforms are never forgotten.
The culture keeps the history alive. We hope this discussion deepens your understanding of this incredibly complex figure and encourages you to explore the rich material connecting history, martial arts, and Chinese national memory.
All right. So hopefully you liked that. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Oh, let's get the camera back over here. For some reason it moved. There we go. All right. Okay. So first of all, there's one thing that they kind of briefly mentioned that it might, like, if you don't know too much about the history, it might be a little weird. They mentioned some statues that were erected later, right, far after Yue Fei was died, right? So in an attempt to rehabilitate his memory, can you kind of tell us a little bit about these statues?
I think there are 4 statues in total, in the form that they are sitting on their knees as a punishment because they were the accusers of Yue Fei for no solid evidence. Whenever tourists going there, they usually spit on them or beat them as a public public shameful action to despise the corrupt officials.
Yeah, the corrupt officials who ultimately got Yue Fei put to death. Right? So I think Yue Fei in particular is a very unique person because he is a real historical figure, right? He's not some kind of like magical animal who came down, came down and gave kung fu to the people. No, but the thing is, so then there's 2 things at play, right? So a lot of people attribute the creation of several martial arts to Yue Fei, right? But what are we seeing? Is that true? Did he create all these styles? What do you think, Claire?
You are the expert. You should be the one to answer the question. The perspective I'm interested in is Yue Fei was famous for his military tactics, and could you find any correlation between his tactics used in the battlefield and his contribution to martial arts? I'll give you an example. Yue Fei invented the horse feet cutting saber, which he used in the battlefield, where the Jin invaders armed their horses with armors, and the formation was so hard to defeat. So Yue Fei was never focused on only one fixed formation. He improvised. That's why he focused on the legs and the feet of the horses, because you can't let the horses wear boots made of iron, right? So Yue Fei invented the horse feet cutting sabers. That's how he defeated the Jin invaders. And in his Yue Fei's army, he invented the Yue Jiaquan or something like that. When he ordered his soldiers to practice Yue Jiaquan, they have to have a form stance called the horse stance. I think it's the same thing in catch wrestling or other kinds of martial arts. You have to lower your stance to make yourself stabilize. That's a crucial thing to win a competition. So what do you think? His tactics in the battlefield and the correlation with his contribution to martial arts.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of principles that can translate to all these martial arts. So then I think that's why many people who develop, I think one of the most famous cases would be the Xing Yi Quan. So that's one of the more famous internal kung fu styles, on par with like Tai Chi and all that. And because it's kind of more like rigid motions, really straightforward, more angular than like a fluid Tai Chi, then I think that's why why many people associate Yue Fei with being the creator. But I'm not sure, because then there's so many styles, right? So they say Xing Yi Quan, they say Eagle Claw, and then Yue Jia Quan, right? So actually, I've studied those. Actually, all of those styles. I fortunately had a instructor who like we studied Yue Jia Quan. So in what we provided for you, it seems as though people say that overall, like the Eagle Claw was for the infantrymen, because they can kind of grab and grapple, and then the Yue Jia was more like literally his family style Yue Jia, right? So and then you have the Xingyi, but so I think while he lived long enough to have created these styles, I personally feel as though he didn't create all these styles, but because a lot of these principles can be transferable across many martial arts. How you even mentioned wrestling and catch wrestling, a lot of these principles are like they're just good to do in martial arts, whether it be sport or fighting a battle right on the battlefield. The principles can translate. So it makes sense that they would be present in all kinds of martial arts. But personally, I feel it doesn't mean that he created all of these styles. They're all great styles, though. Eagle Claw is really cool, and Yue Jia Quan, I think, is one of the cooler styles, very simple, very straightforward. And of course, Xingyi also even more straightforward. So they're all really great styles.
At least, don't you think Yue Fei created Yue Jiaquan because it's called Yue Jiaquan under
I
his
think so.
name?
Yeah, potentially. And then, but so like if we have no evidence of who actually did it, yeah, why not? Because he totally could have, because he was already since he already had that martial mindset and mentality. Then totally, and definitely he lived long enough. People can do a lot in a year. In 1 year, you can create all kinds of things, especially if you're already kind of like a military genius, right? You're already military minded. You can make up all these kind of techniques. So it wouldn't be too difficult, I think. But ultimately, I think since there's so many kung fu styles, I don't think he created all of these. But the principles are good, and all these styles are good. And so one of the main things I think that people should kind of focus on is like learning about him, learning about what happened, and maybe even learning the different martial arts, because Xing Yi Chen, I think, is probably one of the most available, probably even more than Eagle, even though Eagle Claw is a very popular style, or it's like a legendary because it's been used in different movies and stuff. I think Xing Yi Chen is probably you'll probably be able to find an instructor of Xing Yi more easier than Eagle Claw.
Yeah, even though we don't have solid evidence to prove that Yue Fei actually created these styles, but I think it's fair to say that he did make contributions to this style. And it's very important to mention that he actually applied these principles into the battlefield.
Yeah, and I think that would be one of the things where it's like he of anyone would know, right, what would work, right? Because he has a real tangible firsthand experience, right, and as to what worked. Because actually, yeah, can you briefly mention, because he wasn't the type of general to just like tell people, okay, go out there. He was with them, right, fighting. Can you kind of give us a little bit about his like approach to being a general, to leading men?
So I think, according to my knowledge, Yue Fei was the kind of general who ate and fought with his soldiers together. He wasn't like the person that, I just stayed in a comfortable room and gave orders. He cared about his soldiers, and he had a very special way to recruit soldiers. He didn't recruit senior people or pretty young people. He focused on the middle-aged people who were still in their prime years. And his army was very highly disciplined. And that's why the civilians loved Yuejia army. They were like the firefighters in nowadays.
Yeah, like they weren't just taking from the people.
Yeah, they are not like the ice.
Yeah. Or even like we in our constitution, we have that whole idea where the army can't just come in and use your house or all that stuff, because it's people got sick of things like that. And so that's one of the reasons why Yue Fei and his army became so popular, right? Because they treated the common people with respect. So then they were able to work with the common people to get more intelligence and all that. So it's like who would have thought being nice to people can make them like you and want to help you? Interesting. Instead of just being heavy-handed and bullying people. And so I think that's why Yue Fei is still known about and like beloved to this day, to the point where they made those statues that people will shame because they conspired to have him executed. So it's one of these tragic histories or tragic parts of history in general, but then of course kung fu history as well.
Mhm.
Is there any other like point that you'd like for people to know about UFA?
I wanted to give more information why Yue Fei was executed without solid evidence. He was a very successful general. He won many battles. It kind of mentioned in the podcast before that during the historical background, the imperial court only values the civil elites, not the ones who are good at martial arts or being a general. I think we can also find some clues in your water margin podcasts. In that time, generals or like military soldiers were treated like bandits. They weren't taken seriously enough by the imperial court. Once Yue Fei won many battles, both the emperor and the chancellor thought him as a threat. Back then, when Yue Fei was the general, the emperor was the one in the southern Song dynasty, and his father and his brothers were captured by the Jin invaders. His father was the legitimate emperor in the northern Song dynasty. Let's say if Yue Fei could really conquer the Jin invaders and reclaim the territory in the north, which means that his father and his brothers would come back, and that would pose a threat to the legitimacy of the southern Song emperor. That's why the chancellor and even the emperor didn't want a general that who can win battles for them. That's why they find no solid evidence to kill him.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone heard that what you just said. Yeah, it's like so the Song dynasty lost the northern part, so then the child took over the leadership of this what this was called the Southern Song dynasty, and since UFA his brilliance on the battlefield potentially could have won them back the northern territory, which means maybe they could have rescued
Mhm.
the previous emperor of the
Mhm.
entirety of the place. Well, that was a threat as well, right, to the new emperor,
Mhm.
right? So even though they were family, right?
Mhm.
So you can kind of see the mentality of the people in the court, right?
Mhm.
The court elites in the in at that time. So it wasn't it was yeah, it was unfortunate that say someone like UFA who wanted potentially to get back or to re to capture the what was lost, right, in the north, that wasn't in the cards for
Mhm.
the ruling elites, right?
Mhm.
That's the last thing they wanted, so they would be happy with putting
Mhm.
putting an end to any of those threats.
Mhm. And for the chancellor, who was the one persecuted Yue Fei, now he has his kneeling status at Hangzhou. I think there are historical evidence to prove that he received bribery from the Jin invaders. The chancellor wanted a truce with the invaders. That's why he was um, he was he's agreed to persecute Yue Fei.
Yeah, so unfortunate parts in history, right? Is there anything else you'd like people to know about UFA?
I think we mentioned all the important parts.
Yeah, so check it out. Maybe if you wanted to learn any of the styles that are associated with UFA, they're all good. They're all great. Yuka is pretty cool. Yeah, Xing Yichen is really cool. UFA or Yue Jiachen also very cool, but that's probably the most rare. So whatever one you can find, go ahead and learn it because Xingyi in particular is considered an internal martial art, so that means it has kind of like the meditative aspect in there. So you get that the breathing, the mind-body connection going, along with actual like fighting techniques that are clearly fighting techniques. Unlike say something that's really fluid and flowy, like a modern Tai Chi style, you might not know what the technique is, right? It's kind of a representation, a beautiful, flowy representation of a fighting move that maybe even the instructor might not know what it is, or it's up to a lot of interpretation, right? So hopefully this was a good introduction to the Legend of Yue Fei. And so for those of you who happen to be in the Los Angeles area, we'll be teaching classes at the university here. It's called UCLA. Classes are starting next week. So if you have access to the gym, the John Wooden Center, we'll be there. But feel free to ask any questions and let us know what you'd like to hear or what you'd like for us to talk about, or videos. Since it's the brand new year, first podcast of the year, let us know what you want us to be talking about this year, or showing, or like if there's any techniques that you'd like us to go over, or kung fu styles. Just let us know. All right. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for helping out, Claire.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the pleasure is all ours, right? Thank you. And so we'll see you next time.